Hello, Baker Economics students. We're now in week 5, so I hope everyone had a great Thanksgiving break. I know I had a little bit of a downtime for myself away from work, so it was kind of nice. So I got to do a little of my own schoolwork at KU. So anyway, for this week, we'll pick it back up again. So I want to remind you about the three main things that are due this week. One is the cost paper, so you'll continue along with the company that you've chosen for your first paper and the pricing paper. Make sure to address all those questions. The cost paper. If you have any questions for me, do email me, or if you want to meet with me via Zoom, let me know. I'll try to figure out a time that we can meet. The other is to jump back into that forum discussion. So we have that in week 5 and week 6. So kind of pick a topic related to maybe one of the market structures or something to deal with the markets right now. Competition in those markets, pricing strategies within those markets. I saw this week, I think Disney is going to lay off like 32,000 employees. So that's an impact of that particular market, and that many people cannot go to amusement parks when there's COVID being spread rapidly in the United States. So we definitely got to figure out a way to get this in check. And then last, I made some adjustments on the quiz that will actually make it a little bit easier for you the rest of the course. So just chapter 11 quiz, make sure to get that done by the end of the week. You'll skip a quiz week 6, and then week 7 you have your final quiz. So I want to go over maybe some general events first, just with the economy. I guess the good news is, one, that the Dow hit 30,000 this week. I remember in undergraduate school in the late 80s, questioning whether it was going to hit 5,000 or 6,000. So it's kind of really, hard to imagine, like 30 years later, we are now at 30,000. So that does bring wealth to individuals that own stocks. One of the reasons probably the Dow has risen to these levels too is that companies have been able to cut cost in some ways and maintain their profits. And there's still also some anticipation that if we can get the vaccine and things can improve in politics, whatever it would be, that at least some people feel optimistic. The market is supposed to be somewhat of kind of a pulse about people's feelings about the future, whether they're optimistic or pessimistic. So right now, they're, at least for investors, they're optimistic about the future. So that is good. But sometimes, as we know, as we talked about behavioral economics the previous week, is this an illusion? There's still a lot of unemployment. People are going to run out of unemployment benefits. The majority of Americans may not be living as good a standard of living. So, is this market number justified? So we'll just have to wait and see how the next year goes in 2021. And hopefully it will be sustained and it can be justified that, yes, things are turning around and our economy will be improving. So in the meantime, when we look at this week, and what you're going to be reading about is the market structures. There's 4 basic market structures that we look at in economics. There's perfect competition, monopolistic competition, oligopoly, and monopoly. And for the sake of this course, it's so short, I just had you look at monopolistic competition, oligopoly this week. If you get an opportunity, go back and scan perfect competition a little bit, or if it's been a while since you've had this, maybe an undergraduate course. But perfect competition is kind of the example. The wheat farmer, they have to go to the grain mill. They accept whatever price is given for the wheat. They can't influence the market price. Technology is easily accessible to anyone. You can easily enter and exit a market. And but when we get to monopolistic competition, the nice thing is that what we learned in perfect competition applies to monopolistic competition. And really what you're doing now is everything you learned about the cost curves, you're applying those U-shaped cost curves to demand curves, and the golden rule for at least monopolistic competition, and perfect competition is we're going to produce at an output level where marginal revenue equals marginal cost, because that's where we're going to maximize the firm's profits. Now, do firms sit there and count, the next quantity of Q versus the additional cost? They don't necessarily do it in that way. It's not like they're sitting down and looking at this graph, but they are making decisions on the margin. Like just an example of a farmer, if they're thinking about adding more fertilizer, what was the additional cost of the fertilizer? What was the additional output? So firms are always making decisions at the margin and whether this is going to add to the bottom line and profitability, whether they'll take on a project or whether they're going to take on something else that they think is going to add value, just like advertising. So sometimes you have to spend money to order if you have a good product, and that's true for monopolistic competition, which you see a lot of, that they'll spend money to get consumers to buy that product. So Now, one thing I will say in kind of my philosophy about markets and where they're headed, in one way, markets are more competitive, more kind of like perfect competition because technology is available anywhere. We can look up prices and compare anywhere now. So that's, and you can access information, which is much easier for consumers. But at the same time, I'd say that markets in some way are kind of moving more towards oligopolies, and then we're getting fewer and fewer firms. Like I remember Sprint, where I used to work for Sprint, and they're now T-Mobile. We only have like 3 or 4, I think it's maybe 3 telecom companies, and it's really because of what these firms get, what we call economies of scale, lower per unit total cost. And it's going to be interesting, especially in this COVID time period. Can smaller firms survive? And by being larger, you can absorb some of those losses sometimes. But it'd be interesting to see which direction we're headed that way in our U.S. economy too. So, all right, a little bit of overview about monopolistic competition. This is the most prevalent type of market structure. I always like to use the example of like the fast food restaurant. It's similar in the sense that, you know what, it's a cheeseburger, Coke, and French fries or soft drink, okay? But each firm does it slightly different. They try to differentiate their product, whether you're Burger King, you flame broil, McDonald's, you cook it on a grill, stick it in a microwave, your Hardee's, so they all try to do it slightly different. And again, but they're going to continue to make decisions as long as I'm going to base that output level at the marginal revenue equals marginal cost. And where is my price relative to these cost curves? So there's 4 different scenarios in these market structures, at least for perfect competition, monopolistic competition, monopoly. If the price is above your average total cost, you're making an economic profit. That's a great thing. Now, in economics and markets, if you're making economic profits, somebody else is going to see that, and they're going to enter the market and try to eat away at some of those economic profits. I always liked that movie with Eddie Murphy growing up in the 80s, Coming to America. And I think the girl he was going after in the movie and wanted to date, the dad owned like a different version of a McDonald's. Basically, he was getting sued by McDonald's because he was trying to copy everything they were doing. So they're making spoofing and making fun of it in the movie. So, but in the real world, if you are making profits, people are entrepreneurs. They're going to recognize that, and they're going to enter the market, try to eat away some of those economic profits. If your price is exactly equal to average total cost, there's really not an incentive for firms to enter or exit market. It's kind of an equilibrium. We have to remember at the price equal to average total cost, you're covering all your explicit and implicit costs, so your opportunity cost. So if a firm requires an 8% rate of return on their investment, that price equal to average total cost is exactly equal to that. Now, if the price is below average total cost and above average variable cost, this is what we say that a firm will continue to produce in the short run in order to cover some of those fixed costs, because we have to remember the difference between the average total cost curve and the average variable cost curve is average fixed cost. So you're better to produce to at least cover, the expenses of rent, whatever it is. And then finally, if your price is at or below average variable cost, this is what we call the shutdown point. And this is concerning, especially this time period with COVID-19. My wife was telling me about a restaurant down in the plaza in Kansas City. I think it's called Gujo or something. I remember going there years ago, probably well over a decade. But they're having to shut down. And you see a lot of these different like restaurants, small businesses that are just not getting the traffic anymore because of COVID. And you can only stay open so long before you continue to lose and lose money. So it's been tough for a lot of these smaller businesses that can't absorb these losses. And we're going to probably continue to see this trickle into the next year if they're not able to get loans or some type of capital to keep them open. So. All right, so you're going to read a lot about that, but definitely advertising. I kind of go back to my fast food example. You see advertising all the time for McDonald's, Hardee's, Wendy's. It's common, but monopolistic competition is still the most prevalent type of firm in the United States. Now, with oligopoly, this is one that's a little bit different tiger because it's interdependent decisions. And it doesn't necessarily always follow that golden rule of marginal revenue equals marginal cost when making the decisions of pricing and output. So For this structure, they're going to look a lot at the interdependence, implicit collusion. Now, collusion in the United States is highly illegal. The Justice Department would step in, and they have. If you're ever looking for something to read on a Friday or Saturday night, look up the Justice Department, because there's all kinds of interesting cases out there about collusion, how the government tries to break that apart or recognize it and punish those that are engaging in collusion. So. But it is, again, you cannot engage in any pricing collusion in the United States like what OPEC does. Okay, so in terms of this structure, you're going to learn a little bit about game theory. So I put a couple of videos out there from YouTube I thought were decent. You explain a dominant strategy and a Nash equilibrium, but essentially what they're trying to teach here, or the lesson learned in these chapters, is that I have to look at what the competitor is doing and make my decisions based on that. And especially, it doesn't necessarily always lead to maybe the best output or best, I guess, profitability or situation for both firms, but they have to look and think about what the other firm may do, and if I don't do that, what would happen. So the Super Bowl coming up, if Coca-Cola advertises and their sales go way up and Pepsi sales go way down, they may have to say, well, we have to advertise too. So they're constantly looking at what threats are credible threats. Other smaller types of examples might be pricing matching strategies, or just if you see promotions that come out, oftentimes they're matched, if there's something given away, like through car dealerships. So they watch each other closely, but again, it's a lot of times, sometimes may just be to maintain market share, which is maybe not always the best strategy either. But it does, impact, pricing decisions by these firms in the industry. So, okay, well, that's it for this week. But again, if you do have any questions, I just want to give you an overview of the week. And I put a couple more videos out there to kind of help you understand the dominant strategy and Nash equilibrium. But otherwise, we look forward to talking to you online in the forum discussion, and have a great week.